form in ban rahi hai. Solution: script ko length nahi, depth plus pauses, layered explanation se extend karna hota hai. Abe main tame proper 7-minute script di raha hoon. Slow British pacing, natural pauses, deep explanation. Exact Tamhara flow, chart CoinGlass website, close. Alright everyone, welcome back to Crypto Brain, and today we're going to take a proper detailed look at Toshi, and I want you to stay focused throughout this breakdown, because what you're seeing here on the chart is not just a simple move. This is a developing structure. And more importantly, this is a situation where most traders tend to misread the markets, simply because they focus on what is visible rather than what is actually happening beneath the surface. Now let's begin directly from the chart, and take this step by step, because the first thing you'll notice is that price initially tries to establish a base around this support region, and at first glance, this looks quite convincing. You can see buyers stepping in, you can see reactions forming, and naturally this gives the impression that the market is preparing for an upward continuation. But here is where a professional mindset starts to differ, because we're not interested in just their action, we're interested in the quality of that reaction. And if you slow things down and observe carefully, you'll realize that the bounce from this support is not aggressive, it is relatively slow, it lacks momentum, and there is a visible hesitation in price movement, which immediately suggests that although buyers are present, they are not in full control of the market. Now, as we continue forward, you'll notice that price attempts to push higher, but each move towards resistance becomes weaker and less convincing. And this is a very important detail, because in a strong bullish environment, price does not struggle like this. It moves with intent, it breaks levels cleanly, and it maintains structure. But we're seeing something very different. We're seeing effort without result, which is often an early indication that the underlying strength is fading now. I want you to focus very carefully on this next phase, because this is where the entire narrative begins to shift. The market attempts to hold its structure, but fails to form a proper higher low, and instead we get a break in structure, forming a lower low. And this single moment changes everything, because once this structure is broken, the probability of continuation decreases significantly, and the market enters a transition phase. And this is exactly where the majority of retail traders get trapped, because they continue to operate based on the previous trend, while the market itself has already started to shift direction. Now at this point, we'd another layer to our analysis, and this is where things become even more interesting, because we're now going to look at the CoinGlass data to understand what is happening behind the scenes. And as you bring in the liquidation data, you'll start to notice that there are clear clusters forming on both sides of the market, where a large number of positions are stacked. And this is extremely important, because markets are not random. They are driven by liquidity, and price is naturally drawn towards areas where liquidity exists, which means these zones effectively act as targets for the market. And this tells us that the current movement is likely engineered to sweep these liquidity zones before committing to a clear direction. And once you understand this, your entire perspective changes, because instead of chasing moves, you begin to wait patiently for the market to complete its process. Now, combining this liquidity insight with the current price structure, we can start to build a more refined view of what may happen next. If price continues to show weakness and fails to claim resistance with strong momentum, then there is a high probability that the market will move lower to capture downside liquidity. However, if we suddenly see strength entering the market, and price manages to claim key resistance levels while forming strong higher lows, then the narrative can shift back towards bullish continuation. But until that confirmation is clearly visible, the market remains in a state of uncertainty, and this is where discipline becomes absolutely critical. Because a professional trader does not guess, they wait for confirmation, and they act only when the probabilities are clearly aligned. Now, as we move towards the website section, this is where we shift our focus slightly, because the website represents the project's external perception and positioning. And as you scroll through, you can see that Toshi presents itself with a clean interfaces, strong branding, and a structured vision, which naturally builds confidence in the mind of the viewer. And this is important because perception plays a major role in market behavior. However, it is equally important to understand that perceptional one does not drive price action. And this is where most beginners go wrong. They see strong project visually and assume that price must follow immediately. But a professional approach is always to combine perception with confirmation. And now as we come towards the final part of this breakdown and revisit the website, this acts as a psychological close because at this stage you have seen both sides, you have seen the extern whole strength of the project, and you have also analyzed the internal behavior of the market, and when you combine these two perspectives, the conclusion becomes much clearer. The project may be positioning itself strongly, but the chart is still showing hesitation and structural weakness, which means the move is not fully confirmed yet, and the market is still in a decision phase, and the next major move will depend on whether price can reclaim key levels or continue respecting resistance, and until that clarity appears, the smartest approach is patience, because trading it is not about being early, it is about being right, and if you can operate with this level of understanding, then you're already ahead of the majority of traders, and if you want more high-level non-noise analysis like this where we focus purely on smart money concepts, real structure and high-probability setups, so make sure you subscribe to Crypto Brain, because here we don't chase hype, we focus on clarity, and I will see you in the next breakdown.